She discovered a hidden life in a billionaire's home, her amazing journey to family transformation. Every morning, Sarah climbed the hill toward the Bennett estate, the enormity of the mansion looming over her like an impenetrable fortress. The glistening marble, the extravagant gardens, the fleet of luxury cars parked in front, it all reminded her of the chasm separating her reality from theirs. Single motherhood came with its own set of challenges, amplified by her former life as a schoolteacher. Now measuring her worth by the bills she struggled to pay and the groceries she barely managed to afford. In this castle of wealth, each meticulous dusting of shelves felt like it confined her further to her invisible cage. Today, as she reached for the polished banister leading into the grand entryway, doubt crept in. Could she really provide a better life for Lily through this job? Was scraping by in an opulent mansion worth the emotional toll? She hesitated, the weight of her insecurities sitting heavy on her chest. Just yesterday, Lily had asked why they couldn't live in a house like this. One day, Sarah had assured her, but did she even believe it? As she lost herself in the chores of the day, Sarah's heart ached for something more. The weight of economic inequality bore down on her, suffocating. It wasn't just the bills or the scornful glances from the guests. Each interaction served as a reminder of her limitations. Yet, as she meticulously vacuumed the gleaming floors, she felt the creeping tug of curiosity. Today would change everything. While cleaning the farthest corners of the mansion, Sarah stumbled upon a hidden door. Hesitation bit at her neck, but something drew her in. Inside, she found a hidden room filled with letters and photographs, relics of a life she couldn't imagine but desperately wanted to know. Each document weaved a narrative of hardship and resilience, a stark contrast to the life of luxury surrounding her. This was Charles Bennett's legacy, marked by societal injustices that echoed her own struggles, the oppression her ancestors faced. As the weight of this discovery settled over her, Sarah's relationship with Charles began to shift. He appreciated her work ethic and saw potential she hadn't dared to dream about. With each conversation, the lines blurred between employer and mentor. He inspired her to reclaim her own identity, to aim higher than the four walls that confine her. It felt intoxicating, electrifying even, until the past revealed itself in the letters. The histories unfolded with stark realizations. His family's actions had a direct hand in the injustices that hurt hers deeply. Should she confront him? Should she dredge up an emotional confrontation that could destroy the connection they had developed? Heart racing, Sarah grappled with the enormity of it all. She envisioned their conversations, every warm smile and supportive word crushed under the weight of legacy. The feelings of moral obligation clashed with her growing affections. Protecting her source of inspiration or seeking justice, a decision hung heavy in her mind. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. As the shadows of the past loomed larger, Sarah felt the walls tightening around her like a vice. She caught herself glancing at Charles, his laughter singing through the halls, unaware of the conflict that churned inside her. Torn, she stood at the precipice, wavering between risking her newfound purpose for the sake of principle or embracing the comfort of silence, an agonizing choice that could redefine both her life and Lily's future. In that moment, every day spent gilding the edges of her silent struggle morphed into an oppressive tension, leaving her trembling on the brink of collision. What would she choose? The next morning, uncertainty guided Sarah's steps as she ascended the familiar path to the estate. The grand structure loomed above her, a constant reminder of her dual existence, the unmanageable weight of reality pressing against the illusion of comfort. She felt as if the very walls were whispering the truths she sought to hide, and her hands trembled at the thought of confronting Charles. The letters had unearthed a history she could no longer ignore, but how could she betray the nascent connection that had begun to blossom? As she entered the mansion, the scent of fresh blooms filled the air, reminders of luxury she had been brushing against daily. But today, the floral notes felt suffocating, wrapping around her heart like vines of deceit. Determined to find clarity, Sarah focused on her chores but found herself lost in a loop of self-interrogation. Her internal narrative spiraled. If she confronted him, what would that reveal about her own worthiness? Would it undermine her growth, the very spark she had begun to kindle? Yet, remaining silent felt like a betrayal of her own identity, an erosion of the principles she had fought to uphold. Charles entered the room, his presence radiating confidence. There was something disarming about his smile, yet Sarah's heart raced as she met his gaze. It struck her then he deserved honesty, just as much as she needed it from him. The walls, once oppressive, now prompted her to tear down the barriers she had built around herself. Charles, she began, testing the words on her lips like a delicate seed awaiting the right soil to root. Can we talk? The invitation hung in the air, heavy with consequence. He nodded, curiosity lighting up his features as they moved to the sunlit patio. Sarah, I value our relationship, he said, his tone warm yet serious. What is on your mind? She took a deep breath, grounding herself in the moment, letting the morning sun infuse her with courage. I found something, a collection of letters. They told stories of your family and their past, particularly around the injustices connected to our histories. Charles's expression hardened slightly, the warmth replaced by a flicker of something darker. Those letters, they carry weight that is difficult to bear. My family made choices that haunt me to this day. At that moment, Sarah felt a swell of empathy mixed with the urgency of her moral conviction. Charles, I understand the burden of your legacy, but I need to know how you intend to reconcile it. How do you plan to make things right? He shifted his gaze, unable to meet her eyes. This was the heart of her struggle. While she yearned to keep their relationship intact, she also craved transparency. It was a delicate balance, teetering on the edge of romantic possibility and ethical imperative. I don't have all the answers, he finally replied, his voice trembling slightly. But I want to change what I can. I want to be a part of the solution, rather than a remnant of the past. Relief washed over her, yet she felt fear crackle in her veins. They were standing at a crossroads, one pulse away from either forging a deeper connection or unraveling at the seams. Then let us explore it together, she urged, the passion for truth coursing through her. But we need to address the reality of our lives too. I'm not just here to fulfill a role. I want to help us both grow. He nodded, the weight of understanding settling between them. You're asking me to step outside the shadows of my past, and that is not easy, but I'm willing to try. As the sun began its descent, casting long shadows across the garden, Sarah realized that this moment had solidified her role not merely as an employee, but as a catalyst for change. It was daunting, the leap they were preparing to take, but it felt right. Yet, just as hope began to bloom, a notification buzzed on Charles's phone, a message that seemed to seize his attention, drawing his focus outside their burgeoning dialogue. I need to take care of this, he said reluctantly, rising from his seat. The interruption left Sarah reeling. Would this moment, this fragile bridge of understanding, collapse under the weight of his past? What was waiting on the other side, beyond the uncertainty? With the flickering sunlight casting her doubts in stark relief, she knew she was no longer standing at a crossroads, but teetering on an unpredictable edge. What would their next steps reveal about their intertwined fates? The question lingered as the winds shifted, echoing both promise and peril. As Sarah watched Charles step away, her heart sank, the world around her shifting ever so slightly into a muted gray. In that instant, the garden felt less like a sanctuary and more like a stage for an unending drama. She had crafted a delicate moment of confrontation and connection, yet his departure left her vulnerable, stripped of the hope she had begun to cultivate. She sat down heavily on the patio chair, grappling with the tumult inside her. Questions ricocheted in her mind. Was his willingness to confront the past genuine, or merely a facade to placate her? The uncertainty gnawed at her, urging her to take action rather than drown in doubt. She reflected on the words she had dared to say, and whether he understood the weight behind them. How would he react when he returned? Would the unresolved tension forge an unbridgeable gap or deepen their bond? Sarah's mind raced through memories of her childhood, where uncertainty often dictated her reactions, framing her days in shadows. As a child, she had learned to predict others' emotions as a survival tactic. Yet here she was, an adult woman on the brink of transformation, ready to own her narrative instead of merely reacting to others. Determined to reclaim the moment, she stood up. This was her chance to solidify her newfound strength, to evolve from a passive character into an active participant in her own life. She needed clarity, not just for Charles, but for herself. What did she truly want from this relationship? What boundaries did she need to establish? With a deep breath, she moved toward the garden shed, searching for something tangible to anchor her swirling thoughts. Among the tools and forgotten mementos, a forgotten notebook caught her eye. It had been her journal during her early days at the estate, filled with sketches and thoughts that chronicled her evolving self. Flipping through faded pages, she felt a tinge of nostalgia mixed with an invigorating sense of purpose. One page bore a quote she had penned during a moment of deep inspiration. "Courage is not the absence of fear, but the triumph over it." She'd been searching for something to guide her as she navigated her uncertain terrain, and those words resonated with urgency now more than ever. Clutching the notebook, Sarah returned to the patio just as Charles walked back, his demeanor burdened, a hint of guilt shadowing his features. She felt her resolve crystallize a reaffirmation of her purpose. He didn't need her to soothe his conscience. He needed a partner who would challenge him and push them both toward genuine growth. "Charles," she exclaimed, startling him slightly. "When you walked away, it felt like the door closed on our conversation. I want to talk more about how we face the truths of our histories together." His eyes widened in surprise, perhaps realizing the depth of her commitment to this dialogue. "I'm sorry for the interruption," he said, his expression softening. "I didn't intend for it to end like that. What do you mean by face the truths?" She took a measured step closer, urgency propelling her words. "It's not just about your family's past. It's about how we both navigate our futures from here on out. We can't erase history, Charles, but we can choose how we let it affect us. I need to feel like you're in this with me, for real." Silence wrapped around them, thick with understanding. In that stillness, she could see him recalibrating his thoughts, the flicker of recognition in his eyes as he processed the weight of her challenge. A series of thoughts flooded her mind, her ambitions, her dreams of greater impact beyond these walls. Would he join her? Could they build something profound out of their complicated legacies? "What if I told you I'm ready for that challenge?" He finally spoke, a determined glint lighting up his gaze. And with those words hanging between them, Sarah felt a spark of hope igniting anew. Together, they could forge a path toward reconciliation not only with their pasts but within themselves. Yet as exhilaration surged through her veins, a subtle thread of apprehension tugged in the back of her mind. Would their journey transform from a mutual endeavor into perilous entanglements? Would facing their legacies expose greater tensions they weren't prepared for? As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the world in twilight, Sarah steeled herself for the conversations yet to unfold, aware that their collective resolution hinged on choices neither had yet made. She understood that this was merely the beginning. The dance of honesty and confrontation awaited them, and amid that precarious balancing act, Sarah sensed a larger story emerging, one they would have to navigate together. How far would their combined courage lead them in unraveling the tangled threads of their histories? The answer loomed just beyond the horizon, teasing at new revelations yet to come. With the weight of their conversation still hanging in the air, Sarah turned her thoughts inward, pushing aside the fleeting thrill of hope. She felt the pulse of uncertainty flutter in her chest, a reminder that this newfound clarity carried its own risks. What did it mean to challenge Charles so directly? Was she prepared to unleash the power of her voice in a relationship that had previously felt muted? Ready for a challenge? She whispered to herself as she paced along the edge of the patio. The night air was cool against her skin, sharpening her focus. Yet the darkness seemed alive, echoing her fears. What if her determination unraveled everything they had built? Charles's interest intrigued her, but would his eagerness to confront past demons mirror her own? And did she have the strength to navigate what lay ahead? The weight of those questions felt cumbersome, yet liberating at the same time. "Are you all right?" His voice vibrated with concern, slicing through the thick evening silence. She turned to find him watching her, his eyes searching for any hint of hesitation. "I'm more than all right," she replied, instinctively adopting a defensive facade, shielding her vulnerabilities behind a mask of confidence. It struck her how easily she had reverted to her old patterns, building walls rather than bridges. Challenges required more than mere words. They demanded the willingness to reveal one's core. Taking a moment to breathe, she recalibrated her response. Let us redefine how we face those truths, together. The shift in her tone transformed their conversation into a collaborative exploration instead of a confrontation. It was an invitation for him to step into the vulnerability she had been grappling with. No more pretending she held all the answers, but rather embracing the fact that both of them were in uncharted territory. Together, he echoed, and she could sense the transformation in him, too. He appeared more present, leaning forward with a spark in his eyes. What's the first step? The question hung in the air, and for a heartbeat, Sarah hesitated. A part of her yearned to devise some grand plan, filled with certainty and a well-thought-out script. But she knew that real progress required honesty, and that honesty must begin with her. Let us start by truly sharing our stories. The good, the bad, and the ugly. She said it before, but this time felt different. The stakes felt higher, the commitment greater. I want to understand the legacy you've been carrying as well as the one I've carried. Only by doing that can we forge a new path forward. She saw his brows furrow with contemplation. What shall we reveal? He asked, his voice steady but cautious. Let us not hold anything back, our childhoods, our losses, our fears, she said, the urgency of her past pushing her forward. I want to know how they shaped who you are. As she articulated her thoughts, clarity enveloped her. This wasn't just about Charles' history. It was about her own transformation from bystander to active participant in both their lives. The tension between them shifted. It was palpable, yet charged with potential. He nodded slowly, the gravity of their discourse settling around them. Okay, but only if you're willing to go first. A moment of hesitation coursed through her. It was one thing to ask him to speak openly while she remained a guarded figure. Yet, this was her chance to unlock her own truths. Wasn't that the essence of growing together? With a deep breath, she began to recount fragments of her past long-held fears, moments of courage against adversity, dreams that had been stifled in silence. As she spoke, she felt the unseen barriers between them start to crumble. The act of sharing became an act of empowerment. And what about you? She challenged, sensing the urgency building within their exchange. What do you carry? As his eyes flickered with an internal struggle, Sarah's conviction swelled. It was then that she realized their stories might weave together in a way neither anticipated. They would confront their vulnerabilities, perhaps, emerging transformed. Yet even as he opened up, shadows of doubt echoed in the recesses of her mind. Would this unearthing of their pasts yield the growth they both sought, or would it unearth buried pain that could threaten the very foundation they hoped to build? As the night continued to deepen, the horizon restless with untold stories, she braced herself for whatever might unfold. What revelations awaited in the silence that followed, and how deep would their commitment to this shared truth test the very fabric of their connection? Those questions lingered like a melody, hinting at the chaos and beauty that lies in exploring the depths of their lives beyond their bloodlines. The next step was imminent. Could they both weather the storm of their revelations? The stillness of the night enveloped Sarah and Charles, casting a soft glow on the intimacy of their discourse. As she continued to breathe deeply, drawing courage from the crisp air, she noticed the subtle changes in his posture, a slight leaning in, a deepening trust mirrored in his gaze. This was their moment, and she was acutely aware of the weight it carried. With a flicker of determination, she resumed her narrative, peeling back layers that had clung to her for too long. I remember the first time I felt truly abandoned. I was 7, playing hide-and-seek in a neighborhood park. When I realized I was lost, that initial joy transformed into pure panic. Her voice trembled slightly, revealing her vulnerability. That experience shaped how I approach relationships. I so often fear that if I disclose my true self, I'll be left behind again. Silence lingered, thick with empathy. Sarah's heart raced as she dared to confront her past, questioning why it was easier to verbalize her pain than to allow herself to feel the fear that had gripped her for years. Charles, too, was swallowed by his own thoughts, the battlefield of his past reflected in the way his brow knitted together. She felt the urgency for him to share, yet she hesitated, aware that pressing too hard might shatter the fragile atmosphere between them. "Your turn, Charles," she encouraged gently, swallowing the jittery anticipation that threatened to drown her resolve. He ran a hand over his face, exhaling slowly, as if he were preparing to swim through dark waters. "I've lived my whole life feeling like I had to measure up to impossible expectations," he finally admitted, eyes cast downward. "Every achievement, every accolade, it's never been enough. The pressure to be perfect has suffocated me. And now, with you here, I want to break that cycle." His voice cracked, and it echoed like thunder in the space between them. He was stripping down the armor he had worn for far too long. Sarah sensed the gravity of his confession, the sheer weight of vulnerability that teetered on the edge of devastation. Here was a man who had built a fortress around his heart only to willingly dismantle it with her presence. "Why do you feel that way?" she probed, not to pry, but to draw him further into the depths of his truth. "What happens if you fail to meet those expectations?" Her words cut through the air, compelling him to reflect further. "I fear nothing more than disappointment, especially from those I love. It's like losing them all over again, a pattern that feels inescapable." The sincerity in his voice gripped her even tighter, creating a bond forged in the flames of shared pain. Sarah recognized a silent challenge igniting between them. They were challenging not just their personal narratives, but each other's instincts to recoil. Each revelation was a testament to their courage, an iterative thread that could unite or entwine them further in their vulnerabilities. As Charles spoke, clarity hit her like a jolt. "We've both been living in echo chambers of our fears. But in this space, we can change that narrative together. The fear of abandonment doesn't have to dictate our future, nor does the fear of disappointment." The back and forth of their revelations cascaded like a storm, and she sensed that each shared truth might yet expose the shadows lurking behind their ambitions. They were peeling away from the past, crafting a new legacy together. But even as they wove their narratives, shadows flickered at the edges of Sarah's mind. Was she ready to steadily bear the weight of Charles's hidden aspirations and emotional turmoil? Would diving deeper into his fears reveal more about her own, or would it draw them apart yet again? Images of uncertainty surged. Her resolve began to quaver. This newfound connection, though beautiful, felt precarious, seemingly one step away from collapse. Could she maintain her newly reclaimed power while remaining emotionally open to someone who carried his own burdens? At that moment, the faint echoes of their truths left them both breathless yet invigorated. The room around them seemed to pulse with the potential of their companionship, upholding the promise of growth entwined with intimacy. They stood on the precarious edge of mutual vulnerability. How far were they willing to plunge? Just as silence threatened to suffocate the fresh air between them, a sudden thought raced through Sarah's mind. What would happen when setbacks emerged, when the shadows of their realities threatened to engulf their newfound clarity? A new wave of uncertainty cascaded over her, breathing life into the lingering question. Could they challenge the narratives embedded in their histories? And more importantly, were they prepared for what lay beneath the surface of their entangled truths? The morning sun crept through the curtains, casting a warm glow over the room that had witnessed their deep exchange. Sarah lay awake, the light a stark contrast to the shadows of vulnerability she had confronted with Charles. Her mind swirled, wrestling with the enormity of their shared truths. How was it possible that such a connection could emerge from two people so entwined in their own fears? Determined to fortify this new chapter of her life, she rose from the bed, each step toward her morning routine igniting a fire within her. She could no longer let her abandonment fear guide her actions. Today marked a fresh start. In the kitchen, the scent of coffee wafted through the air like an invitation. As she prepared breakfast, she focused on those small moments, slicing the strawberries, pouring the juice, turning mundane tasks into a mindful practice. These were not mere chores. They were grounding rituals that reminded her of her autonomy, of her ability to carve out her path. Charles appeared at the doorway, still rumpled from sleep, his presence a reminder of the emotional distance she felt for so long. As she looked at him, her earlier anxieties faded briefly. They had both shared their pain the night before, yet she sensed an underlying connection that was both thrilling and terrifying. "Morning," he said, His voice warmed despite the remnants of sleep. "Morning. Want some breakfast?" She replied, trying to inject lightness into the air. "Yes, please," he murmured, drifting closer, drawn in by the soothing aroma. As they sat down to eat, Sarah felt the weight of the conversation still lingering, pressing against her chest like an unseen force. "Last night was intense," she began, eyeing him cautiously. "I feel like we both spilled a lot. How do you feel about everything?" Charles took a moment, his eyes narrowing thoughtfully. "Honestly, I feel lighter, but also scared. Like I want to run away from it all at the same time." His candor struck her, a flash of truth that ignited her own fears. Would sharing their burdens strip away the very foundation they were building or strengthen it? She began to consider the idea that fear was not inherently negative. Perhaps it served as a compass, pointing not toward retreat but toward growth, toward becoming someone better than they had been together. "I think we need to keep talking," she said, taking a deep breath. "It's not just about sharing what hurts. It's about moving forward in a way that honors our vulnerabilities without letting them control us." The air pulsed with unspoken potential. As she spoke, a realization unfurled like a flower opening to the sun. Her belief in his capacity to overcome his fears mirrored her journey. It was about discovery, not just of their hidden truths, but of their hidden strengths. She felt a ripple of empowerment coursing through her veins, urging her onward. "Maybe we can help each other find those strengths," he replied slowly, an idea crystallizing in his mind. "Like a shared accountability. Can we challenge ourselves together?" She considered the weight of those words, excitement intertwining with fear. There was something almost electric in connecting their aspirations, crafting a collective narrative that allowed them to elevate each other beyond the expectations that had confined them both. "What if we commit to facing one fear this week?" she proposed, feeling the thrill of possibility. "Just one tangible step away from our pasts." A smile broke across his face, illuminating his typically pensive features. "I like that. Let us hold each other accountable." As they finished their breakfast, laughter began to bounce between them, forging an unspoken pact in the jubilant air. It was exhilarating to contemplate the fears that loomed ahead, yet knowing they could tackle them hand in hand forged a bond neither had expected. But as Sarah glanced outside the window, the horizon beckoned, reminding her that her journey didn't merely rest with Charles. Every choice they made would intertwine with decisions behind incomplete narratives waiting on the periphery of their lives. What if confronting one fear opened the floodgates to deeper struggles, darker revelations? It was a risk she could no longer shy away from. As she allowed herself to breathe in the crisp morning air, a flicker of dread ignited within her. Could she truly face the truths lurking beneath the surface, and what sacrifices might be required to effect meaningful change? The only way to find out was to dive deeper into this transformation, inch by inch, as each step would strain the pull of her past. The morning sun heralded new possibilities, and with a determined heart, Sarah resolved to confront whatever lay ahead. But in doing so, she wondered if she was truly ready for what was to come. The clock chimed softly, a gentle reminder of the moments slipping away. Sarah stood at the threshold of her day, a feeling of exhilaration mingled with anxiety thrumming through her. Today wouldn't simply be another day, it would be a decisive moment in her journey towards self-discovery. As she filled her backpack with her laptop and notes for work, her mind bubbled with the anticipation of stepping out of her comfort zone. The idea of confronting fears with Charles had ignited something potent within her, pushing her beyond the boundaries of routine. But the thought of facing the first challenge created an unsettling knot in her stomach. "Face one fear," she whispered to herself, trying to infuse the words with a sense of power they didn't yet possess. Arriving at the office, the atmosphere buzzed with the familiar sounds of typing fingers and ringing phones. It felt safe, yet stagnant, every cubicle a miniature world of unacknowledged dreams. Sarah often found herself caught in a cycle of predictability: work, eat, sleep. Each day bled into the next without distinction. The absence of challenge had been her quiet companion, keeping her both comfortable and unfulfilled. She resolved to shake that up today. "Sarah, can you come to my office?" Her boss called, pulling her from her thoughts. The pit in her stomach deepened. What could he want? She steadied herself, reminding herself this was all part of her commitment to growth. In his office, He sat behind a desk cluttered with reports. Andrew looked up, his expression serious. "I'd like you to lead the upcoming project presentation. You've been doing great work, and I think you're ready for more responsibility." Her heart raced, a wild mix of dread and exhilaration. Leading a presentation felt like standing at the edge of a cliff. Sure, I can do that," she heard herself say, but the tremor in her voice betrayed her calm exterior. "Good. I know you will. We need someone who can inspire the team, and I believe you're that person." His vote of confidence ignited a flicker of self-belief. This could be her first assertion toward overcoming not only the fear of public speaking, but the fear of being seen as a capable leader. She had been operating in the shadows, content to blend in. But today was different. Sarah left the meeting with a newfound focus. She could not afford to retreat to the depths of self-doubt. Instead, she spent the afternoon preparing, creating vibrant slides, and rehearsing her narrative as if it were a performance rather than an obligation. Each word she conjured became a step up the cliff, a chance to leap into the unknown. Later that evening, while going over her presentation in front of the mirror, she felt her confidence bubbling. "You can do this," she said to her reflection. "You're more than capable." Yet, the moment she closed her laptop and prepared for bed, a pang of anxiety gripped her. What if she stumbled? What if she forgot her words? She could already sense the whispers of doubt trying to suffocate her resolve. The truth had crept in. Even the smallest victories had a cost. That night, as she lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, Sarah felt the weight of her fears acting as anchors. Yet among them, something started to shift. She was no longer just afraid of failure. She was beginning to understand that the promise of growth lay just beneath the surface of discomfort. And here was the gamble. Was she willing to embrace the chaos that came with facing her vulnerabilities? As she drifted toward sleep, visions of standing before her colleagues confident, articulate, and genuine played out in her mind. Would she step into that light, or let it fade back into familiarity? Her heart raced as she grappled with that question. The first step had been taken, but the trajectory of her transformation teetered on the edge of this very moment. Tomorrow, she thought, the real challenge begins. As the dawn's light threatened to break through her window, she clutched at her resolve, ready to confront not just the fear of public speaking, but the deeper fears of inadequacy that had gripped her for years. Would she truly allow herself to be vulnerable in front of her peers, risking judgment in exchange for authenticity? The question lingered, as enticing as it was terrifying, setting the stage for what lay ahead. The morning light cascaded through Sarah's window, illuminating the room in a warm glow that contrasted sharply with the turmoil in her chest. Each pulse of her heart reminded her of what lay ahead, a presentation that would test her newfound determination. She rose, inhaling deeply as though to fill her lungs with confidence, then dressed meticulously, opting for a crisp blouse that reflected her desire for professionalism and authority. At the office, the buzz felt different. Beneath the usual rhythm of keyboards tapping and phones ringing lay a charged anticipation, her colleagues sensing the shift. The elevator ride to the meeting room felt like a countdown, each floor bringing her closer to the moment of truth. Her mind raced. What if she faltered? What if she wasn't inspiring? Each worry clawed at her. The meeting room door loomed ahead, and she had to decide how she would enter. She could either slip in unnoticed, carrying the weight of self-doubt, or stride in with authority, commanding attention. She remembered Andrew's words, "You're that person." As she opened the door, the murmurs quieted, eyes shifting toward her. Adrenaline surged. This was it. She stepped forward, her heart pounding, not just in fear, but with purpose. She had a narrative to share. It was time to own it. "Good morning, everyone," she began, her voice steadier than she felt. The presentation flowed as she described the project, her slides transforming from mere visuals to supportive elements of her story. The initial anxiety ebbed away, allowing clarity to replace her jitters. However, the real test was yet to come. Midway through the presentation, a question disrupted her momentum. Jason, a senior colleague known for his critical feedback, leaned back in his chair. "But Sarah, what factors have you considered that could derail our timeline? What is your contingency plan?" For a split second, her mind blanked, and self-doubt spiraled back in like a thief. She wrestled with the urge to retreat, to apologize for any inadequacies. Yet, in that moment, she felt a surge of defiance. She recalled her preparation, the hours invested not just in her slides, but in envisioning her responses. Great question, Jason. I factored in potential obstacles, such as resource delays. Our plan includes timely check-ins with stakeholders, ensuring early detection of any issues, she replied, feeding off the interest in her colleagues' expressions. The room shifted around her. They weren't just passive observers anymore. They were engaged participants, eager to discuss the ideas she was presenting. The awkwardness faded, replaced by a collective energy that fueled her momentum. Pushing through, Sarah articulated her vision with growing confidence. By the end of the presentation, she had embraced her potential as a leader and was no longer merely filling a role, she was defining it. As her colleagues started to clap, a warmth blossomed inside her, a radiant acceptance of not just her skills, but her right to take space in the room. After the meeting, Andrew cornered her as she gathered her belongings. You did fantastic. I knew you could handle it. Thank you, Sarah managed, the praise washing over her. I think I really might be onto something. But beneath the surface tranquility, a question thrummed relentlessly. How would she continue this momentum? What other aspects of her life had she neglected in the pursuit of safety? The fear of failure, once paralyzing, was now transforming. She had glimpsed what was possible, and the thought of reverting to old habits gnawed at her. Determined, she resolved to pave new paths for personal growth. This victory had emboldened her, but further explorations awaited. What other fears lurked silently in her life, shackling her? As she packed her things and left the office, a new idea began to form. She could no longer shy away from her true ambitions. It was time to take charge of more than just a project presentation. It was time to confront herself in every unexamined corner of her life, beginning with her relationships. What would happen when she reached out to the people she had distanced herself from? Could vulnerability further her journey? With these questions swirling in her mind, Sarah stepped out into the bustling street, feeling a flicker of excitement and fear dance at her fingertips. Tomorrow, she would reach out to Charles again, not just to confront her fears, but to truly connect. It was now or never, and with her heart pounding, she embraced the thrill of uncertainty. Would this invitation lead to further revelations, or would it unearth even deeper fears? The adventure was only just beginning. The sun hung low in the sky as Sarah walked down the busy street, the vibrant energy around her mirroring the fire igniting within. Each step echoed her determination to connect and to seek something deeper than professional accomplishment. The moment she pushed down the apprehension about reaching out to Charles, she felt invigorated, as if she were shedding false layers of herself. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. It was a message from Charles, simply asking if they could talk soon. The timing felt uncanny, as though the universe was nudging her towards confrontation and connection simultaneously. Sarah hesitated, her thumb hovering over the screen. Did she dare initiate the conversation? Would he welcome the vulnerability she was prepared to display, or would he recoil? She had distanced herself from Charles, partly out of fear of the emotional labor required to engage. But now, the stakes felt entirely different. She was no longer avoiding discomfort. Just do it, she whispered to herself, pressing the send button. How about coffee tomorrow? As she walked into her apartment, the familiar surroundings felt stifling. The wall art, once a grounding presence, now loomed like remnants of the excuses she had built. This was the sanctuary where she had masked her fears and insecurities, but it also encompassed the relationships left unattended. The unexamined life she had accepted lingered in every corner, silent yet powerful in its insistence. Later that evening, she decided to take inventory of her mind. Writing in her journal had always been cathartic, a medium between her thoughts and the outside world. Flipping through previous entries, the tone felt stark, filled with laments about mundane frustrations, aspirations too timidly expressed. The pages echoed her struggles and doubts, but they also held the seeds of her growth. Today I faced the fear of judgment, she wrote, and the exhilaration of speaking my truth. If I can do that in my career, why can't I apply the same courage to my relationships? She burned the midnight oil contemplating her ideal conversations, envisioning how she would lay bare her aspirations for deeper connections. What if Charles were open to rekindling their friendship, and even more? Could she articulate how his absence had echoed in her life? The night faded into dawn, and with it came her resolve. It was time not just to speak, but to listen, to draw others in rather than allow fear to keep her isolated. She felt a swell of anticipation for her upcoming coffee with Charles, a mix of eagerness and apprehension compounding her energy. As she prepared for her meeting, she chose her attire carefully, selecting a chic yet approachable outfit. It was a declaration of her intent to embrace authenticity. Standing in front of the mirror, she practiced her smile, a subtle reminder that vulnerability needn't be cloaked in sadness. It could radiate warmth and openness. When the time finally came for the coffee meeting, Sarah was surprised at how nervous she felt. The cafe, bustling and vibrant, seemed to reflect the emotional unrest she held. She spotted Charles seated by the window, his brows slightly furrowed over his steaming cup. His presence anchored her, yet unease stirred. As she approached him, memories flashed the laughter. The shared hopes and a pang of regret struck her hard. What had they lost? Could she breach the rift and seek the truth held in their relationship? "Hey, Charles," she greeted softly, her voice wavering slightly. His gaze lifted, and for a moment, the world hushed around them. "Sarah," he replied, a hint of surprise coloring his tone. "It's been a while." The hesitation flickered in the air like a tangible entity, hanging between them as she settled in. What would she reveal first? Her ambitions? Her longing for reconnection? The unexamined fears that had kept them apart? "Can we talk about everything?" It was out before she could second-guess herself, a manifestation of her desire to confront and dare to connect. Charles blinked, the surprise in his eyes transforming into something unreadable. Would he engage with her vulnerability, or would a wall go up that she couldn't navigate? As the conversation began, Sarah braced herself for the unknown that lay ahead. Her heart raced with the realization that this moment would either mark the beginning of reconnection or the silence of lingering distance. What truths would emerge from this dialogue, and how would it shape their relationship? What unforeseen revelations awaited them both? And most importantly, would this encounter help Sarah redefine not only her connection with Charles, but with herself? Over the clatter of cups and the gentle murmur of the cafe, Sarah took a steadying breath, anchoring herself in the reality of this moment. She was ready to open up, ready to lean into the vulnerability that had once felt so daunting. Charles looked at her with anticipation, his eyes searching, revealing the hope for reconnection as much as his own fears. "Charles," she began, her voice firm yet gentle, "I've been reflecting a lot on our relationship and how much I value the connections in my life. The last few weeks have taught me that I want more than just surface interactions." His brows knit together, and she watched as he processed her words, the vulnerability she was offering hanging between them. "I want to be honest about how you've impacted my life, how our conversations opened doors I had shut tight. But I also need to address the distance that has formed. It feels wrong, especially after everything we've shared." She noticed a flicker of concern cross his face. Her heart raced. Would he retreat, or would he reciprocate her honesty? She pressed on, steeling herself. "I believe we can challenge each other, confront the narratives we've carried, and build something meaningful beyond these boundaries we've created. I've faced fears I never thought I could, and I want to be more than a spectator in my own life." Charles leaned in, absorbing her words, the tension in his shoulders easing slightly. "I felt that distance too," he admitted, voice low. "I thought if I kept my struggles to myself, it would somehow protect you. But I see now that it did the opposite. It kept me from being present in our relationship." Her spirits soared at his acknowledgement, a hint of warmth igniting between them. They were not merely discussing their past. They were actively unraveling it together. "Let us move forward," she proposed, her heart pounding with a mix of anticipation and fear. "Let us commit to challenging our own beliefs and supporting each other in this journey. And that means opening up when it's hard." He nodded slowly, considering her words, the walls that had once loomed high before him beginning to crumble. "I'm ready for that challenge. It scares me, but I need to confront my past too. I want us to navigate this space with honesty." As they articulated their intentions, Sarah felt a shift within, a liberating realization blossomed. This was her achievement. This conversation marked a turning point, reclaiming her power to forge deeper connections. Charles's willingness to dive into the complexities of their fears mirrored her journey. They agreed to meet weekly, not just for coffee, but as a commitment to their growth. Sarah no longer felt suffocated by self-doubt. She was stepping into the light, ready to face challenges alongside Charles. As they left the cafe, Sarah felt the spark of possibility crackle in the air. Why had she ever feared vulnerability? This was the catalyst for growth, fostering authentic relationships and embracing the messiness of their histories. Days turned into weeks, and with each meeting, they unraveled deeper truths. Sarah spoke of the abandonment woven into her narrative, the fear of being left behind. Charles shared stories of the pressure to uphold a legacy he never asked for, every revelation expanding their bond. The breakthroughs they achieved reinforced her belief that facing discomfort fostered resilience. Each week brought tangible moments of growth. She took on leadership roles at work with newfound enthusiasm, actively participating in discussions, no longer lurking in the background. By the end of the month, Sarah had led several successful projects, making a significant impact in her department. Her confidence rippled outward, evident in the way she approached colleagues, shared ideas, and even welcomed constructive criticism with grace. She was no longer defined by her past. She had evolved into a force of competence and recognition, drawing strength from the very vulnerabilities she once feared. A few months later, at a company-wide meeting, Sarah's accomplishments were celebrated publicly, receiving accolades she hadn't dared to dream of. In that moment, standing in front of her colleagues, a wave of pride washed over her, a recognition that felt so richly deserved. She had proved to herself her worth, not just as an employee, but as an invaluable contributor. That day, as she exited the meeting, Charles caught her eye, his expression radiating admiration. Their transformation and her own was evident. They had navigated a turbulent journey, moving from fear to connection, uncertainty to solid ground. Their partnership had become a source of fuel, igniting further aspirations within her. With a solid and unwavering confidence, Sarah felt the transition of the era. She had conquered the emotional barriers that had once held her back and embraced a newfound clarity about her goals. "Let us keep growing together," she said to Charles, a grin spreading across her face. "We're just getting started." This connection forged from vulnerability had shaped her not only as a more competent professional, but as a fulfilled individual. She had become the architect of her narrative, dismantling old beliefs to create a brighter, bold path ahead. Tomorrow awaited, filled with potential and possibilities. And with Charles by her side, she was prepared to blaze trails that extended far beyond her previous confines. The sun was rising on a future filled with hope, possibility, and authentic connection. Now, this is your moment too. You need to subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and support dynamic personal journeys like Sarah's. Comment your reactions and theories about this transformative conclusion. And please, share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this inspiring journey unfold. Don't wait even one more second to spread the message of growth.